We'll go ahead and get this April 10th MPO Executive Finance Committee meeting called to order. First up, we have a vote on approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion on the agenda? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, the agenda is approved. Up next, we have a vote on approval of the March 7th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Move. Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion on the minutes? See none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Up next, we have our consent and vote on contracts and expenses, and we'll turn it over to Dylan.
Thank you. We just have one item for you. This is a renewal of our subscription to Gov Delivery. This is the system we use to send out agendas and have the public subscribe to our newsletters and public input notices and so forth. We put this in the budget. This will be the second year we've used it. We've been happy with this so far, so we recommend continuing on.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign opposed. All right, motion carries. Up next, we have our consent and vote on the March financial statement, and Mayor Bozen at the one.
We had our meeting yesterday and I think we approved everything that was presented to us. Seems like we're in pretty good shape, so. Dylan wants to follow up with more of the actual detail.
Yeah, the financial statement itself, there were no questions or comments. One thing I do want to mention that will come back for you next month is the committee talked about, we have a lot of money in iPate. It's the interest-bearing account for public agencies. They have an option to lock in fixed terms for kind of like a CD, but we have the option to do that. So we did talk about that, and I think that's something the finance subcommittee recommended that we should look into. So we'll come back next month with a proposal for how long and how much money and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that.
I think we thought we had another month or so before rates maybe changed. We're going to keep this posted on stuff.
Move approval.
Second. And moved and second. Any discussion on the financial statement?
Not necessarily the financial statement piece, but reserves. We talked a little bit about the money that's been committed out of reserve, and obviously the money we're talking about moving into this other account. Do we have a standard on how much we like to see in our reserve account? Because I was talking about half of it we're spending.
Yeah, we have a policy that we eat 25% of our operating budget in reserve in some fashion, so we wouldn't do that. I don't remember the exact number that comes out to, but we'd be clear of that.
Okay, that's it.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Up next, we have a presentation on the vote on street light data, and Dylan.
Thank you. Last month, we spoke about streetlight data, and basically, just to recap, the technical committee's been looking at software like this. We heard some presentations a couple months ago, back in December. The technical committee recommended moving forward with streetlight. The proposed subscription would be on $79,000 annually, and this would provide access to our member communities. Last month, the group, basically what we asked for is we put this in the next year's budget, but can we move that up to spend it now so we can use it for our long range plan and some other projects? The committee was supportive of that, voted to continue, but there were some questions on the privacy aspects, and I think the group wanted to see the final agreement before we actually did anything, so we brought it back. We also have representatives from Streetlight on the line here online. Julie is with us, and I know she's got a couple slides she can walk through and just provide a little more insight of how this works and what the privacy implications are, and just can kind of give you a visual of what this actually looks like. So Julie, if you want to take it from here, feel free to do so.
Great, and are you going to put up the slide? Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody, I'm Julie Herney. I'm the director of the public sector sales team for Streetlight. I've been with the company about 7 years. I'm going to walk through 2 or 3 minutes of slides, but really just want to answer questions for you guys and ensure that you're comfortable with how the solution works. Basically, what it is a on-demand mobility analytics platform. So understanding how people are moving in and around the Des Moines area by asking questions. We use a variety of different data sources, which you can see on the left-hand side of this. It's connected cars, GPS, location-based services. Basically, you're making a recipe with a bunch of different data sources. All that information is aggregated. It's never at the individual level. And when Dylan and his team are creating analysis, they can look at activity across cars, trucks, bike and ped, and bus and rail. And what the output is when they do those analyses is interactive visualizations and then data that they can download and keep in perpetuity. Can we move to the next one? So one thing that's very important to us is we follow privacy by design. That's our data privacy framework. So the other thing that I want to make clear to you guys is we don't ever have any PII, that's personally identifiable information. So any information that we get are going to be aggregated trips. It's never going to be an individual. It's going to be bunches of trips so that you can understand what activity looks like. And this is just a couple of things, like with examples like aggregated composite groups. So half the group of people who travel to this location live 10 miles away or more. And another important thing to note is whenever an analysis is submitted, we go through a automatic coverage and privacy check to ensure that that's not too small of a sample size. And if the sample size is too small, that would ever potentially allow for any privacy things, it's denied. So there's a coverage check. There's just, coverage is in place to ensure that privacy is never compromised. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to show you one quick visualization so you can get an idea of what the interactive visualizations can look like. So this is an example that Aaron did using a local example from Dylan and his team, to where you can understand how pedestrians, like how many pedestrians are moving around Euclid Avenue in Des Moines. So this is an example of what you're going to get so that you can understand where the most activity is. Obviously, the larger the visualization, the more activity there is. So this can help you with planning efforts to determine where you want to prioritize or put particular interventions, or understand how people are moving around your community for those long-range planning efforts. So let me stop there and see if you folks have any questions.
So this is going to track bicycling, pedestrian, cars on whatever, in trucks, wherever we target in
Yeah.
all of our areas?
Yeah, so you can get metrics on any type of mode. So the modes are, you can look at cars, you can look at trucks, you can look at bike and ped, and that depends on like what the subscription is that you want to look at. But if you want to understand pedestrian activity across an area, this is an example of what that would look like. And the technology is smart enough to where it can identify whether it's a car, whether a person's walking or biking based on a number of factors.
For our subscription, what we've looked at is autos and freight for right now. We could look at this.
How much more is it for bike and?
It's
Pedestrian, I think.
Yeah, and pedestrian.
79, so the package we have right now is 79,000. I think if we went up to bike and ped, it would be 150, 160,000. Julie, you might correct me on that.
Yeah, that's a good ballpark. And I can get you specific pricing after we're done. I just don't know it off the top of my head, but you can start with whatever you want. If you ever wanted to add additional functionality, you can add that at any time during your subscription. It gives unlimited access for all of the stakeholders. And Dylan and I have been working to allocate a certain number of seats for all of the communities that are going to be involved. The subscription also includes training and onboarding. So support, training, and onboarding is included. We're going to work with you guys to make sure that you're getting return on investment and understanding how to best use the solution.
Ask you, what's the accuracy? If you've got a bike counter that shows you got 80,000 folks in a particular area, is this going to be the same 80,000, or what's your, I don't know if it's using a phone. I read the packet before and the white paper was not clear to me what the accuracy of it is.
Yeah, great question. It really depends on what you're looking at. For greater accuracy, you can do a longer data period. So it depends on how much volume there is. As you can see in the upper right corner, there's a ton of activity and a ton of volume in the upper right corner. So if you're not getting a lot of activity, there's things and best practices that Aaron and the team can do to help you get a larger sample size. So you can increase the number of months that you're looking at. We can also do calibration. So if we wanted to use your permanent counters for bikes and do the sample against what we're pulling on, you can compare. But yeah, the accuracy depends on the sample size, where you're looking at, a number of factors. And Aaron, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you said that perfectly. So if you're in a low volume area, we would just recommend evaluating volumes over or speeds over a longer period of time to improve your accuracy. So we can't give you an actual number because it does vary, but it is is a very high accuracy.
So you
Okay,
could
but
do
if
bike
you-
paths, so you could do bike trails, so you could really track the trails in a better way than having somebody stand there.
We could, and that is something we're looking at. So with respect to the bicycle pedestrian data, at our policy meeting, I don't remember exactly the policy, but I think it was a policy meeting, some people mentioned that others like the partnership or Catch Des Moines use similar services. Theirs are more focused towards bicycle pedestrian. It's not streetlight, but it's something comparable to it. So that's why we would look at maybe not doing that with streetlight
Right,
right now,
right.
maybe look and see how good their data is and whether there's opportunities to partner. And
I've
one thing that
never
we've
seen
looked
their
at.
data. I've never seen their data if they have that.
Okay, yeah, I know Catch is just getting it, partnership has had it.
Yeah, the part, I've never seen, I guess they've never shared that with us. I mean, that would be a good tool to have as we plan for, you
And you have to
know.
make specific requests.
You have to make a
Um,
specific, okay.
Yeah,
Requested.
yeah. We've requested data around some of our
Yeah.
more high traffic areas,
Yeah.
and they've had some of it. But I haven't drilled down into.
To see how active, what they're using or what they're doing, so maybe we could collaborate,
And one thing that
start with
bicycle
this.
pedestrian roundtable is looking at is just that question of could these replace trail counters? And we want to make sure they're, just do some comparison first before we invest in one or the other too much further.
So invest in this, then look at possibly bringing everybody else together to do the bike count.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when we do major road constructions, it's always do we put a multi-use trail? Do we just put a 5-foot sidewalk in? It would be helpful to know, some people don't want a bike lane on the road. It'd be helpful to say, well, we have a count of how many bikes are being used here. Yeah, I think that would be.
And we give you a comparison of the 5 foot versus a designated lane
Yes.
in areas that we've already put it to see how
Exactly.
many are using it. So if they already have that info, great, but if not, if their technology is better,
Right, and that's what we want to evaluate.
compare, okay,
We can, like Julie said, we can always add on to this.
right.
So, but back to the accuracy, what I heard was it depends on your sample size. So I know we got before us a $79,000 proposal. I don't know what that sample size is, but can you tell us is the accuracy 50% with that 79,000, or what should we anticipate?
I
It's
think,
gonna, yeah, I'm not trying to be evasive and your questions are good, but it's gonna depend on what you're analyzing because the sample size is different. You can be looking at an entire, you're gonna define the geography that you wanna look at. So if you're looking at a particular corridor that has a lot of volume, the accuracy is gonna be very high. And I'm happy to share with you, we've done a pooled fund study with FHWA and with 18 different DOTs across the country to where we got their permanent count data. We have permanent count data for over 40 states that goes into our vehicular metrics, which is what you're buying or what you're considering buying. So with those, we've done substantial validation efforts, and I can send you links to all of our third-party validations to where we've taken permanent counter data and compared it to our accounts so that our customers can feel comfortable that they can use this information. And what we always do is compare that to permanent counters versus temporary counters. We're not trying to replace those. A permanent counter is always going to be your best bet. But in many cases, folks are wanting to calibrate or validate, especially when you're doing planning efforts to make sure that you're confident in the counts that you have. It also gives you a count on 365 days a year for every road in your geography. And not everybody can afford to have permanent counters everywhere. So it's a supplement to the tools in your tool chest.
Julie, how long would it take for you to provide those links to Dylan so we would be able to disseminate that amongst the policy board?
Today, I mean, it's all published on our website. I just need to send you the links, but I'll send you the validation. I'll send you the link to the pooled fund study, all the third-party validations. That's available like right now on our website, but I'll send you the link so that you can find it.
Yeah, but to Matt's point, how long, is this a year subscription? Is that
it'd be
what
an
it is?
annual subscription.
So how long do we have to do the data to get an accurate number? I mean, she said it's all the time, so we're only doing 12 months.
All the data is there, and the data is there back for a number of years, so we can, at any time, pull up a corridor and say, what was the traffic on it yesterday, or over a span of a year versus a day versus, I think that's what they're saying, and if you're going on a low volume road, and you're just looking at it for one afternoon, the accuracy may not,
Yeah.
great, if you're looking over a year on a high volume road, the accuracy will be really good.
Yeah, and you'll
Okay.
have a full year to be able to run unlimited analyses within the geography that you're subscribing to. So you can run as many as you want. And at the end of each of those analyses, you have the option to download them. We highly encourage that. So once you run the analysis and download the data, you'll own that in perpetuity. So you'll have platform access to run everything, have these analyses, iterate on demand, but you can download everything at any time, and we highly recommend that.
So are we gonna be like a partnership and we've got to request it from the
No,
MPO?
there will be a number of-
Or, I mean,
We'll have seats for our communities that they will have direct access to the tool.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah, so they.
And
won't
we'll
have
teach
to
you
go
how to
request
use it. Sorry, I didn't-
We'll have, guess we'll have an educational component to let people know that the tool.
So we'll,
exists.
You'll go through the technical committee and,
correct,
okay.
and we'll have trainings and.
the people, but no.
Yeah.
But no,
Right, okay.
That's the benefit of this, is you all individually don't need to go buy something like this. We can get it through the MPO and you all have access to it.
Well, I mean, it would be nice if we can consolidate it in. I mean, if the partnership's doing it and we're doing it, why could we just, I mean, you're kind of charging transportation, they're really not, so I mean.
Yeah, what they're using it for is like, if we had an event, how much did that increase traffic, street traffic to go to restaurants and stuff like that? That's what they're looking at for. So it's a little different, but we have started that conversation of can
Okay.
we collaborate on this?
Okay, that'd be a good thing. I'll move this.
second.
Been moved and second. Any additional questions or discussion on this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, it passes. Up next, thank you, Julie, for your time today.
Thank you, and I'll send, Dylan, I'll send you links to the white papers I referenced. Thank you, everyone.
All right, up next, we have a report and vote on an additional 2 services by the top contract services, and I'll refer to Dylan on this.
Thank you. So as you recall, To the Top, which is Cass Hall's consulting group, was hired to do the executive director search. Through their work, and then in talking to them after that work, they came up with a couple of she came up with a couple of additional work products that we could consider, and I think as staff, we think this would be worthwhile doing. One would be a human capital plan, and that would really be adding on to the salary work that they're already looking at, but going a little bit further and helping us strategize, do we have the right people? And what I mean by that is just the right type of skill sets and so forth, with the right job descriptions, with the right titles, with all of that, and kind of thinking about that a little bit further than just looking at the salaries. The second piece would be a governance assessment. So looking at our board structures and so forth, is this the right decision-making structure to help all of us do the work we need to do? So really staff level, board level, 2 different things going on there. Then when you combine that with a more strategic direction of what is the work we do, that kind of makes the trifecta of, do we have the right board decision-making structure? Do we have the right staff doing the right work, doing the right things? So that this strategic plan. The cost for both of those things would be $1,300 or $13,450. There's a timeline included in the agenda packet. Both of those would be pretty aggressive. I think one would be done at the end of May, one at the end of June. We have work program amendments coming up in the next item that would budget these and allow us to expend the funds, but wanted to open this up to any questions, comments, concerns anybody may have.
When was the last time the governance was looked at?
It would have been looked at with the strategic plan that was done in 2018.
Okay, so it's been a while.
So we're due for our strategic plan
Right,
update. This
yeah.
would kind of be doing it a little more.
Okay.
I'm kind of wondering about the timing, with the separation of a few employees moving to the mid-Iowa planning lines, et cetera. Should we be waiting to do that until fall, when we look at the organization and we decide, do we need additional people? I know during finance, you talked about there was a position you weren't filling, and
Right.
I just hate to see them do all this work, and quite frankly, it doesn't match what we have for people.
Well, I would look at it flip side, that it's better to do that now before we look to filling the positions. This would help us understand, do we actually need to fill those? If we do fill it, do we fill it the same way we otherwise would have, or do we kind of shift gears a little bit? That's, for me anyway, that's.
Yeah, I would
why
think
like
that would be
to
the
do
front
this.
side to, what do we need?
Right
So,
size the organization.
Right size of now
Exactly.
before you go into, if you don't need to fill it, great. If you do need to fill it, or what is the skill set we're missing? So I think it's important we go ahead and do it.
So that's a part of what they will be doing, is helping us right size the organization.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Move approval.
Second,
Been moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Up next is report and vote on the fiscal year 2024 work program and budget amendment number 2. Dylan.
Thank you. So this builds off these last two items in some respects. Finance subcommittee reviewed this yesterday too and recommended approval, but really we're looking at a work program and budget amendment that would address three main items. So one would be to reduce the revenues that the MPO is receiving from the two contracts with SERPA and MIPA. Those contracts ended at the end of March. So we will be reducing those contracts by the fourth quarter, by the equivalent of what we otherwise would receive for the fourth quarter. In addition to that, we're looking at adjusting staff expenses, partially because of that contract, those contracts ending, the two MIPA employees, and then we have another MPO employee, Andrew Collins, who left to go with MIPA. So we're not paying their fourth quarter expenses either. And Len, as Len just referred to as well, or alluded to as well, we've had two staff positions on the MPO side that we have not had filled this entire year. So one, we're removing it completely because we definitely will not be filling it, at least not yet. The other one, we've left the fourth quarter budget just in case we do hire someone, we'd still have a little capacity to do that. So that reduces staff, that includes salary, wages, as well as fringe benefits for all of those positions I just mentioned. And then additional expenditures would be for streetlight and the to the top contracts we just spoke about in the last item. If you go to the next screen, this summarizes everything, and this was included in the agenda packet as well. So you can see up on the top, our costs, the salaries and the wages and the fringe benefits are reduced, and then the other direct costs are increased for the streetlight and the to the top contracts. And then in the bottom part, you see the revenues are reduced for the SERPA and the MIPA contracts. All told, it's a net benefit to the organization. It's a swing of about $150,000, which is great because we were negative because we had some unforeseen expenses such as the director search and so forth that came up. So now this puts us on a much better footing going into the end of the fiscal year. Any questions? I'm happy to take it.
It's a report and vote.
Move approval.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Up next, we have a report and vote on the employment, housing unit, and population projections. Zach.
Thank you. Staff has been working on housing unit and employment projections for the long range plan. This is something that we're required to do every 5 years as an update to the long range plan. And this information ultimately feeds into our model, which helps us make transportation decisions across the region. So staff worked on this earlier in the year, started working on it in January, had some draft numbers to share with the tech committee in February. What we determined for projections, you can see on the screen there before you. In that period, we used the same methodology that we had used in the previous plan. That methodology went through a lot of review and approval during the last update. The only thing we updated was the new census data we had. We used that to make some adjustments to the numbers. Otherwise, the methodology remained the same as it did in the last plan. And then you can see on the screen there before you the numbers that we have. So an increase in a little over 140,000 jobs, a little over 100,000 in housing units, and almost 240,000 in additional population over the period of the plan. We got a few tables here. I'm not going to go into these in a lot of detail, but just to show you that we've broken down the employment projections and the housing unit projections and the population for each of our individual communities. We have it for the years going out in 5-year increments, 2030 to 2050, 2025 to 2050. And then we show the overall growth there for employment, same thing with housing. And then with population, I would note on population, this is not something that we use in our model. In our last plan development, we was requested that we include population just because it's an easier number for people to wrap their heads around as opposed to housing units. You can see that we're showing a little over 610,000 population in the planning area today. And then that would be going up to a little over 850,000 by 2050. Again, the methodology is included in your agenda packet with all the details of how we got to these numbers. A few things I would touch on just regarding what this is used for and what it's not used for. We do use this as a tool to help us assist with regional transportation plan decisions. It's not an end-all be-all, but it does help us inform decisions across the region. It also helps set a baseline for any studies or IJRs that might happen in conjunction with other land use and growth planning scenarios. I think more importantly to hit on is what this is not used for. It's not used to determine any allocations of STBG funding or any other federal funding sources. It's not used to determine those award allocations. It does not determine what projects move forward for communities. That's a decision made by the communities. This does not have an impact on that. And then it does not have an overall impact on how each community actually ends up growing, moving into the future. It's just a projection of what might happen based on the best data that we have available to us. Staff presented this information to the tech committee at their February meeting. It was presented as an optional vote. We asked if they were comfortable with the numbers, we could move forward with the vote on that. And if they were not, that we could give them some more time to provide additional feedback. They ultimately wanted to take a little bit more time to look at the projections, and staff gave them to the end of February to provide that feedback. We ultimately received feedback from 4 communities over that period. Bondurant, Norwalk, Pleasant Hill, and Waukee all provided comments. All their comments really were, and concerns were similar in nature, and all really focused in on the population projections. And there were some concerns that those projections were lower than what they were showing in their comprehensive plans. I think there are a couple of probably key reasons for this. One of them is that the MPO has traditionally used a control total within the metro. That's a best practice that's recommended to us by the Iowa DOT, and it limits the amount of growth basically that we can see over the time period of the plan. I think additionally to that, there are just differences in how the methodologies of the comp plans for their projections are done compared to how the methodology is completed for the LRTP. I would note that one other concern that was mentioned to us was that there are other regional organizations that do use the MPO projections. Moines Waterworks was one that was brought up. Staff did take some time to touch base with the Moines Waterworks and discuss with them just exactly how they're using the MPO projections. And what they told us is that they use the MPO projections as one source of data, but for their full membership, they're allowed to meet with them and make any kind of adjustments to that number if those communities feel like those numbers, the MPO projections are not accurate. So it's one data source they use. It's not what they're basing all of their decisions on. It's what we were told. Moving back to that control total real quick, following the concerns that were expressed to us, we did approach the DOT to follow up with them on the control total and see if that's something that there was any room to adjust or move around on. They did highly encourage us to continue to use control total produced by an independent source. Staff uses Woods and Pools as an independent source. It's a nationally known organization that provides population projections, employment projections, and it's the same source that's used by other agencies in the state, including the State Data Center. They projected the 4-county region to be at 855,000 by 2050. Our numbers had the planning area at 850,150. So we're using up pretty much all of the 4-county projection. From a staff perspective, we feel comfortable with that, but just as a note, we are already pretty much taking up the entire allocation that Woods and Pool has for that 4-county area. So really the challenge that was facing the MPO staff is to address the comments we received, we would have to move away from the use of that control total that's recommended by the Iowa DOT. We did present several options of what we could do to the technical committee at their March meeting. These include options that remove the control total. We also include options that kept the control total, but would require us to look at each individual community and make decisions on which ones we're going to grow at higher rates than the other communities. Ultimately, the tech committee, after a lengthy discussion, decided to just stick with the numbers that we presented in February. The community voted. It was all yes votes. We had one no vote from the city of Pleasant Hill. So the tech committee's recommendation is to move forward with the projections that we presented to them in February and the ones that are currently presented in your agenda today. The next steps would be that we would send these growth allocations off to each member. They would put those around their community where they see fit, send it back to us, and then we ultimately incorporate those into our model. So I know that's a lot of information. I'm happy to take any questions you might have on this, but otherwise it's before you for your approval.
Questions?
No, but I have a comment. The Iowa DOT recommends using independent third-party data source and preparing projections. Agreed. However, according to the Iowa DOT staff, they are open to using other data and information that is reasonable and defendable. The DOT guidance is not mandatory, but it is considered a best practice to use an impartial data source. And I looked through the internet, found a few. Rural Population Review was one. Anyhow, if local information shows there are reasonable data sources, building permit numbers, special census counts, comprehensive plans, or other independent study sets, they can be considered as alternative sources of information. I fully understand that requires a lot more work on staff and folks trying to put that together or hiring a consultant. My concern still remains the MPO calculation numbers go beyond use for transportation planning efforts. You mentioned one, wastewater reclamation is another. And those numbers really do go into some of their short-term, long-term budgeting and planning for community growth. So those communities that are growing at a faster rate and noting the World Population Review, which their trends, quite frankly, show a number of communities, Altoona, Ankeny, Bondurant, Des Moines, Polk City, Waukee, Dallas, and Warren counties are below the trends of the projections, what the MPO is proposing. Cumming is not included in our data set that I could find, and they've got a very large warehouse being built down there that's going to add quite a bit of traffic flow, and I'm talking semi-truck to the metro. I don't know how that gets incorporated in this in some fashion because it's still under construction, so we don't have real numbers to work with at the moment. But in order to address the concerns, I propose we add further context to this report by just including a qualifying statement that housing, employment, and population projections are completed by an independent consultant and do not take into consideration permit data, growth initiatives, or special consensus counts that are underway in many communities or other priorities or constraints individual communities are experiencing. Many communities may anticipate and expect more growth in the forecasted timeframes as captured in our long-range transportation plan modeling. Then we're not actually throwing additional numbers in there. We're not asking for additional research to be conducted, but we are trying to qualify the report that it doesn't include these kinds of things, and some communities can expect potentially much higher growth records than we're reporting here. And I know we tend to be conservative in our numbers, and I support that as well. So I would just like to see that qualifying statement in there to protect some of the communities that are growing at a faster rate than this projects.
Yeah, we can absolutely add that in there.
So you will, Glenn, you can provide a copy in the Zach of that language.
Yes, I can send it to you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I've got one. So I guess I will echo concern in regard to the accuracy of the projections. In Bondurant, we don't agree with this at all. We think it's way low compared to what it is. It's low compared to 2025, let alone 2050. How frequent is this done? I'm sure you said this.
Every 4 years.
Every 4 years.
Yeah.
So this, and I totally understand the methodology, the thought process, and had a chance to connect with Dylan on it a couple of times. I'm not opposed to the process. The notion that a third-party company is really what we're relying upon to develop these projections. There's a number of communities here in the metro who are going to be going through some special census this coming summer. I'm just curious, is the third party willing to go back and relook at their projections if in case that their numbers are grossly inaccurate, like some of those communities are thinking they will be?
I would imagine that Woods and Pool probably would not do that, but I don't know for sure.
And I want to clarify too, Woods and Pool that we use, it doesn't get down to the community level. It does it at the state and at the county level. That's where it stops. So we take their county level projections and break it down and disaggregate it even further to individual cities. So they might not be able to do something like that, though. Again, if we update this every 5 years, as Zach said, we can update it more frequently too. If we see tremendous, we've done that in the past where, like Glenn said, if there's a new development that comes in that we didn't consider, we can always amend that and add that in and adjust accordingly. So that's, keep in mind, that's always an option to do.
So if the new census comes out,
Well, that's just what I'm kind of thinking, is that if the census results come back and a lot of these communities are much higher, maybe even, and I don't know who all's doing one and who's not gonna be doing one, so it's gonna be a little bit non-scientific, I guess. But, clearly the concern, as shared by Glenn there, is what's the downstream effects on this stuff? And if it truly is as inaccurate as what we're perceiving, then that's a concern.
We would have to figure out in that case what we do to that, because that would change the 2025 year. It wouldn't necessarily change the 2050 year, but we could figure out some sort of adjustment maybe that happens.
If we updated that base year, everything moving forward would go off of that base year, so it would change things, and we could make that change once these numbers were into us.
So I'm even a little more confused when we say the numbers we're getting from the independent authority is based on the county. Who then is breaking down those numbers for the individual communities? Is that MPO staff?
Yes, so that's given the methodology Zach mentioned that we've been using for 15 years or so now in the current form that it's in.
Yeah, and so that document that was attached to your agenda goes into a lot of detail about how that methodology works. The independent source is just used for the control total for the metro area. So we're not using it to determine what each individual community has. We're using census data to develop a base year for each individual community, and then using the last 10 years of growth to determine a rate for each one of those communities, and then using that rate to project out over that time period. We put some governors on in out years to make sure we stay within that control total. That makes sense. Like I said, the document walks through it.
Kind of. I'm still troubled by the population numbers.
well, the population, if we know if everybody does a census and they change dramatically, you have the ability to make that modification internally.
We would.
And then you could reproject out.
We reprojected, we had to send the numbers back to those communities that did the independent censuses,
Census.
and then they had to redo their growth scenario, and then we could incorporate those numbers back into the model.
And I'm gonna guess the Woods Group is gonna collect the data census for their overall for control, which is what, 855,000? The full county, we're utilizing 850 of that, so we're utilizing most of within the area, our numbers. So really what we're talking about is like a difference like about 5,000 potentially.
Right.
The census data will come out. Ankeny's doing a special census. And I can pretty much tell you right now what we believe our population to be based off of our housing permits and stuff of that nature. So every 4 years, there's gonna be a little bit of difference here, but again, I think we're putting really too much emphasis, like sure, WRA, Central Iowa Waterworks. They're doing their own studying our plan too. So if a community is growing by tens of thousands of people, then we see some methodology problems here, but we've used this for 15 years, I think I heard it say.
In the current form.
Yeah, in the current form. So what have been the problems in the past 15 years is our communities have seen based off the projections?
This is the first time that communities have expressed concerns about the methodology.
I remember when we first started this 15 years ago, I think the west side was thinking that we were underreported at that time, so I don't think there's anything really new, not novel there. I think I recall that discussion at the time we originally started this thing, so it goes back to the point as far as how, I don't think it's causing any problems necessarily.
Right. And it's important to keep in mind, again, like Zach started with, what it's actually used for. And I hate to say that this is not, there's no point to it. There is a purpose to the model that is useful, but it's not the end all be all. It's not something we, use as the Bible to determine what projects are funded. It's just one tool, and it's hard to make a model that is reflective of the entire region. The growth area is reflective of all the different ins and outs of the entire region.
And it's not prohibiting our individual communities to use their own growth projections and their own allocations.
Right.
Like waterworks and all those people would be based on permits and stuff. I would think, because they have to hook up to water.
All this conversation said, this is something that if we have 5 years until we have to do this again, we will study and we will see if there's other alternatives and we can methodologies. One thing we've thought about is, would it be worth all the communities pulling together and including in the MPO and hiring an actual demographer or something that this is their specialty? The issue then is everyone have to agree to go along with that. And that still might have control total issues, although if there's other sources we can look at that might be a little more amenable. So there's other options we can look into. We don't have to decide it right now, but.
Other discussion? All right, Lynn, I think it sounds like you're gonna provide the language, you're gonna include that.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve based on adding the additional language clarification, if you want.
Second.
We're moving second. Any further discussion? None, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, up next, we have the report and vote on the federal funding recommendations, and Zach, back over to you.
Thank you. Staff received the targets from the Iowa DOT for both the STBG program and the TAP program for FFY 2028. For STBG, we have a little over 17 million available to allocate this year. For TAP, it was 3.4 million. I would note that that's 2 years worth of allocation on TAP. The DOT was working through some issues with TAP last year, and we didn't award TAP last year, so that's 2 years worth for TAP. The applicants came and presented their projects to the funding subcommittee on March 20th, and then the funding subcommittee had a follow-up meeting on April 3rd to develop their award recommendation. I would note that in this round, the funding subcommittee also considered 2 other sources of funding, one of them being the excess funding from federal fiscal year 2023 for STBG, which was a little over 1.3 million. And they also looked at carbon reduction program funding, which we currently have a little over $9 million available to us to allocate to projects. On that, I would note that we had brought that subject to you a number of months ago to discuss, and the committee had decided at that time that they wanted to wait until the LRTP was completed before they discussed any award allocations out of the carbon reduction program. The funding subcommittee had an in-depth conversation about the award recommendation this year, and they really kind of took more of a holistic approach, I would say, in this round, just looking at all those various different funding sources and trying to find a way to make sure that all the applicants and all the communities were seeing some funding out of this. The recommendation really came down to 3 main points. One of them would be to award out the STBG and TAP funding as it is outlined in the attachment in your agenda packet. I will go through those projects briefly here in a second. The second part of it was to award the excess funding that was available to a couple of Polk County projects that were previously outside of the MPO planning area, but now that we've brought all of Polk County into the planning area, to make them whole on these projects, the recommendation was to give the funding to those 2 Polk County projects. And then the rest of the excess that was available, which was around 419,000, that would roll into next year's excess allocation to be awarded out next year. And then the final part of this was to award 3 million of the 9 million CRP funding that is available to DART to address some of their immediate operational needs. So as I mentioned, the awards there, they're in your agenda packet. They're also on the screen. I'm not going to read through each one of them, but these are the recommendations for the STBG funding. So the rest of the ones for STBG, again, they're in your agenda packet. These are the projects that were recommended for funding for the TAP program. And then we have the 2 Polk County projects that were recommended for the excess STBG, and then the carbon reduction funding for DART. I would note that staff was contacted yesterday and informed that there have been some further discussions about awarding funding to DART. Our understanding is that there might be a suggestion to award a little bit more of the CRP funding to them. I will turn that over to the committee at this point to have that discussion. I would just note that the funding subcommittee makes a recommendation to this committee. This committee has the power to make any suggested changes to that recommendation. This is what they have recommended, and that's what's before you for your approval, but it's obviously up for your discussion.
All right, I guess I'll start off and we're all being quiet on this one. So the carbon reduction program, with 3 million of that going, of the 9 million, just a few months ago, we asked to hold this off and the long-range transportation plan to become available, to get a better understanding of that. To me, I understand that we might want to take a third of this and give to an organization that's that needs it to operate, but I'm a little bit concerned about giving this money up, this carbon reduction funding, before we've identified projects within our communities that could go towards fiber optic timing of stoplight intersection improvements. And I'm just wondering if we should delay the carbon reduction program funding discussion to a later date to allow our communities to apply for the carbon reduction program and see, maybe we only have a couple $1 million. If we want to move forward with this will completely be the committees. I'm just a bit concerned about this. Months ago, we'd asked to delay this, and now we're coming in and we're gonna, chop off a third of it. And we did, I know Russ had asked Luis to be here a little bit too to talk, so I'm very open to the idea that, DART is in need of all the assistance it can, and this does fit the needs of that. And if it's the will of the MPO committee to move forward with this, that's fine. I just want to share, I'm a bit concerned about just giving away a third of it before really any of the projects have been identified.
Especially if it's operational costs, I guess, versus, as you just identified, versus capital costs, where it's gonna be a one-time operational cost.
Well, at the end of the day, how long has this funding been around that nobody's applied for, that you still had it left over and you still have 6 million?
Maybe Zach can explain it further, but the funding came about with the infrastructure bill that was passed a couple of years ago.
Right.
And it's kind of awkward that it started in FY '23, but we didn't actually get the funding until just in the last year or so, that we could actually start awarding it. So we started out with a pretty hefty balance of what that fund is. We get about $1.4 million a year. But we started out with a pretty hefty balance because it was about 3 years altogether.
Right. I'm just saying, I know, well, being on DART, it's a critical element right now, and whatever help, because I don't know how much is the MPO even given. We're supposed to be a transportation organization, and it's a regional system, that if we can help them, I think we need to do it. So.
I'm just gonna say, so does this allocation, 3 million, is it in addition to all the communities supporting DART, or does it reduce what communities are contributing, or how does that?
It's reducing the deficit.
Can we hear a little bit from Luis and kind of tell us where DART is on some of their, maybe he can come to the podium.
Oh, boy.
Answer some questions, see where we're at with everything.
Sure.
Might be good information for everybody.
Thank you. Flattered to be invited. So I'm Luis Montoya, the Chief Operating Planning Officer at DART. Amanda Wonk, our CEO, is, she issued her apologies for not being able to be here. She's actually in DC doing some lobbying and conferencing there. But essentially, as some of you are more aware maybe than others, that DART is facing some operational budget challenges. And the overall strategy here is that by contributing to our capital plan, by contributing funds to replace buses, that frees up some of our federal funds that we can then flex over and apply to operating. And so that's essentially what I believe the strategy is here, is that basically all of it helps. I think to the specific question about how this affects existing member community contributions, is that it doesn't. So really this is about avoiding cuts. So however much in additional capital funds, which will be flexed operating, but however much additional MPO funding is provided, allows DART to avoid cuts to service and avoid cuts to general administration.
And
We're
actually,
looking for a 2-year stability.
Yeah.
Well, we have been seeking 3 years, but I understand that at this point, the funding's being targeted to help us with for the next 2 years to establish some stability so that we can come up with a longer term plan.
So I know that we allocate, and it looks like you're getting 1.75 for buses and V-cycle.
In
So
FY
that-
'28.
Okay.
So that's
What is this year you're getting through the grant program? What are
When
you
you say
getting in
this year-
2025?
we probably got around $1 million, but that would have been awarded like 3 years ago, right? And so that we've been requesting about $1 million.
Right, and we allocated this higher through our policy to give.
Exactly.
Right.
Right, so that would have been awarded back then. The SDBG ask is really for FY '28. My understanding is that discussion around the CRP would be to fund, this 2-year stability in FY '25 and FY '26.
And it would allow you to purchase things that you were planning to purchase. And what's the average age of your buses?
Average age right now is, over 13 years. It's about 7 years, because, the oldest buses are over 13 years.
And the electric buses, they just don't, they're out of commission. We don't use them at all, correct?
We're currently not operating them because we're working with the manufacturer to extend warranties hopefully.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not in operation, and they haven't been for.
Over a year.
Do they anticipate going back into operation?
It's a little bit hard to tell. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that, we don't spend more local dollars on these buses if we don't think, if it's not gonna be money well spent. And the problem is that in order to keep them on the road, we're finding that we're having to keep, through our warranties, keep doing repairs to them, right? And so that was fine when it was all covered under warranty. But as we approach the end of those warranty periods, we didn't want to then shift that responsibility to DART. And so we've really been working with the manufacturer. So it really comes down to what are we gonna get out of the manufacturer in order to give us some reduced risk in continuing to operate those vehicles. On a parallel track, we're also working with the FTA to see if we can get some forgiveness on the federal grants that were put into those buses, so that if we did in fact retire them early, that we wouldn't have to pay back money to the FTA.
There was an issue with the frames, as I understood, wasn't it?
It's a number of issues. That is part of it. The overall build quality, rattling, things breaking, water getting in places where it shouldn't. But there's also issues with the suspension and the ride quality, and things that ultimately come down to safety.
And I'll say this as sensitive as I can, because I know it's a very, very hot topic, but to answer your question, Councilmember McKinney, there would be implications to our membership by less grants, due to the funding formula not being fully met by the city of Des Moines. And again, this isn't an attack on them, by any.
We're used to it.
We're
Don't
used to
worry
it.
about it.
Quite honestly, is, there's a shortfall within the whole organization, and we'll take the hit because we've been told that we're responsible. But we also have a mass transit regional system that I think we have to uphold.
I mean, we kind of knew this was going to happen when the governance changed without the funding formula to change with it. And so when the governance changed, then it became a different DART regional service that we provide. Because when it started, the governance was all of us sitting around the room saying, everybody's gonna go to 94 cents. But once Des Moines got to 94 cents, the rest of your communities realized, oh, we need to change something, or our residents are gonna be paying for a lot of the residents to be moving around Des Moines and coming out into the suburbs. So that's where it did change, is when the governance changed, and us at Des Moines told our representative, unfortunately, they didn't listen very well to the majority of the council, kind of went off and did their own thing. And now we're stuck in the position to where we're the bad guys because of that change in the governance, and then the funding changed after that.
Can I just comment, because I don't want to retread dark conversations or history here. I think in terms of what's on the table today, I would just comment that when we tabled the conversation about granting out some of these funds a couple of months ago, it was actually around a conversation that we expected that DART would be coming with a request, that we didn't want to allocate funds before they came with a request. So the conversation that I recall around tabling, putting out some of these carbon reduction funds wasn't really around, we're gonna hold off until we have a whole community regional plan. It was really, we're not comfortable saying we're gonna allocate this $2 to $3 million until we see what the request is, until we have a broader conversation about that. So I'm okay with the conversation around DART today and the request that's in front of us, because it was part of what was discussed a couple of months ago. I think where it just comes down to is, does this meet the requirements of the dollars? For me, and regional transportation and mass transit over individual cars does reduce carbon So as long as we're doing something with the dollars that allocates appropriately and still leaving enough for communities to receive grants out, I'm comfortable with this application of the dollars. What the right number is, that's, you know, already been discussed, and I don't want to retread that either, quite frankly, but, so I just wanted to reset that a little bit, that I think part of the conversation was always around, we thought part of this was gonna go to DART, and we just weren't quite ready to allocate it a couple of months ago because it hadn't even been discussed yet, so I do also absolutely get the point that communities are probably going to have needs around this and will be wanting to submit grants, and this does take away from that. I understand that too. But at the end of the day, if a mass transit system qualifies as a carbon reduction program, which it does, I'm comfortable with that application of the dollars.
So just one question, Louise. So we allocate these dollars to DART. For 2 years, there's 0 cuts. That includes school routes, that includes everything, if this funding goes in place.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So ultimately, this is the request before you is to fund buses, right? And then the flex of that other or FTA dollars to operating, that'll be at the discretion of the commission and at the direction of the commission. Now, I do know, I mean, the commission just had, this is all kind of late breaking, the commission hasn't met to discuss all this. I do know that an executive committee has discussed it, and the executive committee has prioritized reducing service cuts as much as possible. Now, there could be some possibility where we say, you know what, actually, there's a couple of things in there that do make sense. And I've heard a couple of those, don't want to get into them here. So I don't want to say unequivocally no service cuts, but I do want to say that that is the priority, is to avoid.
Of the major routes that serve the most people.
I'm perfectly fine with cutting some, the thing that I seen, the 10 to 20% cuts. I mean, I'm fine with that, but then when you throw the schools in there and you throw that on top of us, you know, now it's the city of Des Moines' responsibility to get these kids to school. That gives me a little angst, because that was never part of the original conversation. And so we're willing to all vote to give these extra dollars. I guess my biggest concern was make sure kids get to school and those routes are still available.
The best I can say is that we share those priorities. I'm just not gonna make commitments that are.
From the commission.
Right, that's a commission decision.
Well,
as
being
executive
on the
committee member, you
commission
speak better.
executive committee, I would think that would be a strong priority that we cut. If we cut, it will be administrative, or it'll be a route that doesn't serve many people, that it will not be routes to get to. If we're gonna talk about carbon, because all these other people are having to drive all these kids back and forth, so it really is a carbon reduction. So,
Cutting routes from 15 to 30 minutes isn't as
so basically it'll be
horrible
minimal,
as everyone is trying to lay it out.
based on those dollars, it should be minimal, if anything, that would be major cuts to the people that use it the most, which is what we're trying to do.
So is there, I heard it, so we're talking 3 million, and Zach, you said something about a higher request. I guess I'm not clear on that, what exactly the request is.
We are putting in, the city of Des Moines putting $2.5 million on top of this, of our general fund into DART to help secure.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just talking about.
You're talking about this.
Yes.
Yeah, for that, oh,
I had heard an additional 600,000.
Well, I had heard that too. So is that on the table today then, the 600, so is it 3.6 or is it 3 that's on the table today? That's what I want to, and then secondly, is this, Luis, is this for 2 years then, or is there gonna be another request next year for another 3 million for next year?
Maybe to tag on to that, because that's the question I was gonna have. It's a very excellent question. Maybe Louise, could you just outline what DART's plan is to get financially stable in the 2 years? So that way we know that this won't be a request every year or every 2 years. Because there is a pattern of history here of using one-time money to keep the operation going. And this appears as though, even though we've been heading towards this cliff, that once again, we're now supplementing Des Moines, MPO, supplementing money to keep our operation. What is the long-term plan? What is the study? What is going on? How are you going to avoid coming back again in 2 years to ask this question?
So, in broad strokes, it's very apparent to us that, essentially, as we look at the trajectory of revenues and and costs, that we have tough decisions to make around the design of our service, right? Who we serve, where we serve, and how we fund that. We've known that forever, right? And we've been trying to solve that. What we found is that there's a disconnect between those two things, right? There are differing opinions about where we should serve, how much we should serve, who we should serve, and how much member communities are willing to contribute, and how, what are those sources of those funds? And that is why, that is the undercurrent of what's driving that continual cycle, as you guys put it, of not resolving this. And so, we've come up with a proposal, it was honestly, it was a 3-year proposal, so that we could look completely at our service, at all our services, right? How can we be as efficient and effective as possible? Where do we want to be in the community? Who do we want to serve, right? That's a whole comprehensive analysis. Also look internally at our business practices and make sure that we're being as efficient and effective as we can with our funding. And then go back to, okay, once we determine that we're being as efficient as we can, or make whatever changes are needed, that we have a plan for where we want to serve and how we want to serve, then we address that funding, right? Okay, given this service, and this is what it costs, how do the member communities want to fund that? And that's where we've been on this loop of property taxes, and people don't want to raise property taxes completely understandably, but then Des Moines hits their cap, and they can't contribute more, and so we're here looking for one-time funds.
But we have been
But-
contributing more.
Sorry, yes, but you have committed to contributing above the cap.
We
So-
have for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
On the behalf of the commission, we have said that we will go out and we are gonna analyze every route, and we're gonna find they can call it reimagine, whatever, but we've got to get off the cycle. Because I'm kind of new to DART, but you can't get more routes, so you get more people, you can't get more people, to get more routes. They're in a circle, and they're trying to appease all of us. And it's a vicious cycle that is not, it doesn't, they've known forever it's not working. We know that even if we would contribute the franchise fee in 4 years, it's still upside down. So we need to do something to analyze it in a way that is sustainable and give them the tools to do that with. So what it becomes, so it's to reimagine DART, figure out what this system is that's going to work. And because if we believe in mass transit as a area, then we need to do everything we can to shore it up and figure out how to make it work consistently without having these cliffs all the time. And maybe, I don't know what that answer is, if there is an ability, but we've got to do everything to try to secure it now so we can really actually look at how we can deliver a system different than what we're doing today.
Luis, I think the request is for 3.6 million, right?
So the total gap for 2 years to keep us whole is 3.6 million.
So I think, I know Chairman Trimble called me last night, so I think the request for the carbon reduction is 3.6, but we'll be able to clarify that before the policy
Yeah.
meeting.
You said the total gap's 3.6, but we're contributing.
On top of what we're contributing.
That's the gap remaining.
And that's the
After
gap remaining
After the ones
after,
2.5.
and then, so then you're whole, and there's no 10% cuts to any routes, or 20% like we talked about. So you're not cutting anything at all if we gave you 3.6, is what you're telling me, or no?
Like I said, up to the commission's final decision,
But that's the gap.
yes.
But if they fill the
That's right.
gap, there's still some things that probably will be eliminated.
Okay, I'm curious. I see 3 million for bus replacements.
Yeah.
And what I hear is 3.6 million, whether it's, whatever the number is, let's call it 3.6. Is it going to buses or is it going to operation?
It is, you are funding buses. Then we take money that we would have funded buses and we put that towards operations.
Yeah, they can take their capital funds, like what they have for
They have a lot
We're
more
trying
buses.
to
the
match-
garage and the things that they do have capital dollars for in buses, and you can move those to
Okay.
operation. They've chosen not to do that until.
So the reason for that is it because the carbon reduction program only allows for capital costs? Is that-
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm sure that's
Yes.
what it
I'm
is.
sure it won't
Okay.
allow operations, ongoing
Okay,
operations.
that's.
And there's probably
I'm
more than
clear on-
3.6 needed for buses
All right.
because they're all bottom row.
All right, that's what I'll make sure I'm clear on.
So does that mean you're gonna turn around and buy $3.6 million worth of buses, or you're gonna turn that into operations and do this reimagined DART And maybe we don't need as many buses, maybe it's a micro train, maybe it's a combination of vans so I guess, are you gonna take all this money and go buy a bunch of buses and?
We are not expanding the fleet.
Okay.
We are replacing the
Replacing.
oldest buses. If we continue to run old buses, that drives up our operating costs. Because it costs tens of thousands of dollars more to run an old bus than it does a new bus. So we need to get those oldest buses off the road. That's what this funding will do. In the event, so we should be buying buses every year. We should be buying 7 to 9 buses a year, right? In the event that in a future case, we don't have as much fixed route service, we need less buses, we can retire, because buses are getting older every year. We will retire the oldest
Okay.
buses then and just not replace them.
Okay, that's my question.
Are we buying smaller buses now too then? Are we right sizing the buses?
Yeah,
Yes, we are.
yes.
Okay.
We're
What's the lead time on that?
buying double
It's like what, 18 months?
Yeah, the manufacturers will tell us it's 18, even 24 months. We're really hustling to get an order in, so that hopefully it'll be closer to 12, but they just won't commit to that.
I know it's tough decisions, but I feel like we just keep kicking this down the road and we're gonna be having the same discussion 2 years from now. I really believe that. Is this gonna be broken out into 2 votes? Or are we voting on all of this as a package?
Yeah, I think that whoever maintains.
Well, then, why don't we do this? I'll move the SCBG funding recommendation first. I'll put a motion on the table.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion on the SCBG funding?
Just to be clear, that's at 3 million, right?
No, we're not
No.
voting on a carbon reduction.
Outside.
Yeah, we're gonna need the.
The SCBG and the excess SCBG funding, I'm moving all of
And
that.
the tab.
Okay.
And it's yes.
Everything with the exclusion of the carbon reduction program.
Right, and
Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
All right, it's been moved and second, clarified. Any discussion on that? We will do a voice vote on this. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Up next, we'll continue our discussion and would entertain a motion on the carbon reduction program.
I would move, just to get on the table, I will move that we award DART $3.6 million from the carbon reduction program.
I'll second.
Moved and second, discussion on the carbon reduction in addition to what we've already had. Seeing none, why don't we do a roll call vote?
Ankeny, Mayor Holm,
Yes.
Ron Durant,
Yes.
Gerald Run, City of Des Moines, Mr. Gatto,
Yes.
City of Des Moines, Mayor Boson,
Yes,
Oak City, Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill, Mr. Murray,
Yes.
City of Urbandale, Mr. Underwood,
Yes.
City of Waukee, Ms. Clark,
yes,
City of West Des Moines, Mr. McKinney,
Yes.
City of Windsor Heights, Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Motion passes.
thank you.
Moving on, we have a report and vote, West Des Moines request to transfer SCBG funding. Zach.
Thank you. The city of West Des Moines approached staff requesting they transfer funding that had been awarded to their Mill Civic Parkway project back in federal fiscal year 2026 funding cycle. They were awarded a little over $1.1 million in SCBG funding at that time. The project is currently programmed in federal fiscal year 2025. They're requesting that they move those funds from that project to their Ashworth Road project, as that is now their main priority, and they want to focus their federal funds on the Ashworth Road project. The Ashworth Road project has also received SCBG funding and currently has 1.5 million, plus the additional money that was awarded in the previous item. The funding subcommittee did discuss this item. We do make transfers like this. They've happened a number of times in the past. Their recommendation was to recommend that the approval of West Des Moines' request to transfer funding from Mill Civic to Ashworth Road. Happy to take any questions, otherwise it's before you.
Move approval.
Second. Moved and second, any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Up next, report and vote on DC list and sponsorship. Gunner.
Thank you. It's that time of year again. We're preparing for the DMDC. I know at least 4 of you are going to be on that trip. Kind of disappointed Joe's not going to be there with you this year. We want
You won't have too much fun.
Of course not. So today we have for you a few things. One, we're gonna do an update on our activities while we're out there. We're also gonna ask you to weigh in and vote on 2 items here. One is on the DC list itself, and the other is on a sponsorship opportunity. So for the DC list, this has been developed previously. The calendar is a little bit wonky in as much as we're trying to get it in on their deadline before we even know what all the community project funding asks are. But we believe the list to be up to date. We did submit it. We had the option to revise it if we are identifying projects that did not make that list. We are prioritizing projects that have active federal funding asks, excluding STVG dollars that we allocate directly, and then also policy pieces. The DC list was in your packet for review. Happy to go into anything if you want to, but I'll keep moving for now. The sponsorship, the last several years, the MPO has been a sponsor of the DC trip. The big benefit is an audience with all the participants during one of the lunches. In the past, we've used that to promote, well, last year we promoted our 40th anniversary and all the investments that the MPO has made. And we've also highlighted particular projects. We also get, handouts, branding on the program, et cetera. We recognize that this body elected to not let the MPO be an investor in the partnership. And so we approached the partnership asking, is sponsorship still an option? And they said, yes, it would be. However, we're prioritizing our investors for sponsorship opportunities. And so they gave us 2 options that were the same price. One was $5,000 to be an investor at a reduced rate for the sponsorship, or just $5,000 for just sponsorship. There's a few options here, obviously, the 2 before you or none at all. Staff would be happy to discuss any direction that this group might like to go. And you know what, I think I'll pause there because I think this is probably the piece that wants the most discussion, and then we'll talk about where we're at with programming for our time there.
I don't think there's a benefit to being a sponsor.
Well,
I mean, what's the direct benefit to being a sponsor?
that's kind of what my question was too. What do you see the?
So I do see benefit here, but it's kind of secondary to our core mission. Like, to me, if we're talking about who do we need to be reaching as audiences, it's our committees. This is it. This is the primary. Now, is there benefit? Sure. Like, I do think there is value in, having the MPO be seen as leader on key initiatives. This would give us an opportunity to drive people to our public engagement for the community or the comprehensive safety action plan, which is how we would use the sponsorship if we want to move forward with it. End of the day, it's not going to make or break us one way or the other. So I think staff is really supportive of whatever direction you want to
How many
go.
of you guys are going on the trip anyway?
From staff.
Yeah, from you guys. Okay, so you're gonna be there.
This might be a little bit awkward to say, but I think the partnership is a bit of a pay-to-play type of organization. So there is. Well, you said it, not me.
I'm trying to be quiet here. You haven't
Well-
noticed, all of you?
I guess I'm more in favor of it. I'm fully supportive of Gunner and Dylan going there. I think that's very important.
Right, very important.
And, if anything, have money in the budget, if during the year or some other time we need to go to DC for additional advocacy, that is available.
Great idea.
So I guess I would say, let's not sponsor, let's keep our powder dry, and if we need to use that for other things, then we have that.
It's also gonna be a fall.
Sounds like there's a general consensus, no investor, we're good. The MPO will always be here because there's always gonna be transportation, whether the partnership saves us or not.
And a leader in the community without being a sponsor and investor.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of ways to do that without doing that.
agreed.
All right, Gunner.
Okay,
So let me continue here real quick, and then we'll bring back to you for a vote on the DC list. Just to give you an update on where we're at for planning, working with the partnership. The Future 435 is a featured priority of the partnership. That means that they will be forming policy teams to go out and meet with different organizations. Right now, we'll be targeting transportation staff for the congressional offices, as well as US DOT staff. And there's one former congressional staff member who has deep knowledge of this particular process. And speaking, of course, of federal action for an exemption on weight, which is part of the Iowa DOT plan that they've put forward in order for us to get the interstate designation. Sponsorship remarks, we can just skip over that. And then the last piece would be the feature priorities presentation. This is something that staff gives to the congressional staff members every year. I'll pause there. This is where we're headed for our programming on the trip.
You don't just, I mean, they wouldn't, that wouldn't be something they would, I mean, they would always want the feature priorities presentation, from us, regardless whether we're a sponsor. I guess.
Yeah, we've been doing that for years. And we haven't always been sponsors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. All right, any questions for Governor? So we're looking to approve 2 out of 3 of these things. Reporting vote.
To
Sorry,
Approve
just
the DC
the
list.
DC list of priority projects.
Second.
Moved and second, any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion passes. Up next, we have other non-action items of interest of committee, and Gunner has one.
I'm gonna do 2, actually. I'm gonna tag on to the end of the conversation about Future 435, just to let you know that the bill is still live in the State House. Stu Anderson of the DOT and myself worked on proposed amendments to address a few things in the draft bill that would help put at ease our egg stakeholders. Those have been submitted back to Representative Lucy, and we anticipate those amendments being handled on the House floor. Right now, we're in a holding pattern, waiting on them to take action. So I don't have any movement to report, just that it is alive, and we're crossing our fingers that it gets over the finish line. Moving on to this item here then, the commercial real estate breakfast, we mentioned this last month, but just to remind you all that you would have the opportunity to join us on the morning of April 25th. We are a sponsor of that event, and we'll be talking about the comprehensive safety action. That's it.
Questions for Gunner on that? Looks like the DLT has something, Shelby.
I do. I have 2 things also. We have the DOT district office is hosting a meeting tomorrow night for the Southwest Mix Master project. The meeting is from 5 to 6:30 at the Learning Resource Center in West Des Moines. We sent out about 550 invitations. Hopefully we'll get a good turnout. There's already been quite a few. It's also available online. There's virtual presentation that you can watch too and get comments. The other thing I've been working on lately is a new webpage. It's the Des Moines Area Interstate Construction website. And there's also a corresponding Facebook account that it just launched like yesterday, I think. But we'll be posting all the updates for the Metro Area Interstate projects. Right now there's 3 up. There's the Hickman Road project, the Northeast Mix Master, and I-35 from Ankeny about Huxley. We'll be adding the Southwest Mix after our meeting tomorrow, and we're also going to put up the 72nd Street Bridge replacement because that is causing traffic to shift, even though it's not real big.
So Highway 5, is that the Southwest mix? Is that what you guys are calling that, or what's the
That's
Southwest mix?
235, 35, and 80,
Okay.
where they come together in West Des Moines.
that mess.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's
guys.
not that far south, that's why I thought it could have been
No.
that. So when you called it Southwest, I'm thinking,
That's what we call that one Southwest and the other one Northeast.
yeah, well, that one is northeast, but yeah, the other one is quite
Not
very
as
south,
south as.
or west. It's west, but not southwest.
Oh, Westland, all right.
Yeah, so you can also on that website sign up for updates to get emailed. We're gonna start sending those out, I think.
Are you looking to reconfigure that whole thing too? Oh, boy.
We'll be taking out the loop that goes from southbound 3580 to eastbound 235 and replacing it with a flyover bridge,
Yeah.
making it another
Awful.
That is
southbound
terrible.
to westbound 80 with the tipping problem on the truck.
Oh, yeah.
With the lights and the signs,
Yeah.
so that'll be a little better. Yeah, too. And
Nice.
then it'll also flip flop.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Right now, you go south on 80, or you south on 3580 and get up west on 80 and 235 is coming, and
Oh, yeah.
most of the traffic is wanting to do this.
It's awful.
So now
Yeah, I
this will
just did it
come in
today.
here, and hopefully, because most of the people that were on 235 want to get off at Jordan Creek.
Billboards from
Most
the
people
left.
getting on 80 want to keep going west, so.
So you're gonna help when you're heading south on 3580 to get on 235, it's not gonna be merge over and go around
If you
that.
don't merge
No,
over
it'll be a
fast
big
enough, you're gonna get
Okay.
slammed by the car.
That's what that
coming on.
definitely needs.
Yes.
That's
That
dangerous.
ramp is over capacity, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the worst. I avoid it if I can.
All right, anything else, Sheldon?
Experienced drivers, that's a
Okay.
problem.
All right, Dylan, you have anything else?
I don't have anything.
All right, our next meeting, exec is, Wednesday, May 15th at 11:30 a.m. Nothing else anyone wants to talk about, we're adjourned.
I get back.
All right, we're adjourned, thank you.
Good job, man.